I never thought the day I planned to retire would be the day I discovered my entire life had been stolen from me. But there I was, sitting in the conference room of Patterson Manufacturing on a Thursday morning in September, surrounded by lawyers and accountants, about to sign over my company to my son Derek, when Margaret Wu leaned over and whispered 7 words that stopped my heart. "Sir, you're not the owner anymore. My name is Robert Jennings. I'm 53 years old, though some days I feel twice that. I spent 12 years in the Marines, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan, got out in 2009 with a Purple Heart, a limp in my left leg from shrapnel, and nightmares that still wake me up 3 nights a week. But I also got out with something most veterans don't get: a plan, a dream. And for 20 years, I made that dream real. The shrapnel came from an IED outside Ramadi in December 2006. I was 29 years old, a staff sergeant with 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. We were on a routine patrol checking on a school reconstruction project. I remember the kids were playing soccer in the street, using a ball some humanitarian group had donated. One of them, couldn't have been more than 7, smiled at me. Biggest smile I'd ever seen. 10 seconds later, the world exploded. The IED was buried under a pile of construction debris, took out our lead vehicle. Killed Corporal Martinez instantly. Lance Corporal Davis lost both legs, and I caught a piece of metal the size of a quarter in my left thigh. Missed the femoral artery by 2 inches. The docs at Landstuhl told me I was lucky. Didn't feel lucky. Still doesn't. But that piece of shrapnel taught me something. Life can change in a heartbeat. 1 second you're smiling at a kid with a soccer ball. Next second, you're bleeding out in the Iraqi desert, wondering if you'll ever walk again. Patterson Manufacturing, named after my platoon sergeant James Patterson, who didn't make it home from Fallujah. We made industrial components, precision parts for construction equipment, mining machinery, things that keep America running. Started in my garage in Columbus, Ohio, with $15,000 from my VA disability settlement and a small business administration loan. By last year, we were doing $42 million in annual revenue, employed 217 people, and I was ready to hand it all to Derek, my only son. The kid I'd raised by myself after his mother died of breast cancer when he was 9. James Patterson was the best Marine I ever served with. He was 34 when we deployed to Fallujah in 2004, older than most of us, with a wife and 2 daughters back in North Carolina. He'd been a machinist before he enlisted after 9/11. Used to talk about precision tolerances and quality control while we were cleaning our weapons. Most of us thought he was crazy, obsessing over measurements and specifications while we were in the middle of a war zone. But Patterson said the same attention to detail that makes a good part makes a good Marine. Discipline, focus, pride in your work. He died covering our retreat during the Second Battle of Fallujah. Took 3 rounds to the chest so the rest of us could get to cover. I held him while he bled out. His last words were, "Tell my girls I love them." I never got to tell his girls. Didn't have the courage. But I could honor his name, his principles, his belief that good work matters, that precision matters, that taking pride in what you build is how you build a life worth living. The garage in Columbus was a 2-car space behind the house Karen and I had bought in 2003, right before my second deployment. It was a small ranch-style place in Clintonville, nothing fancy, but it was ours. When I got back from Afghanistan in 2009, broken and angry and lost, that garage became my salvation. I'd spend 18-20 hours a day out there, teaching myself CAD software, learning CNC programming, cold-calling construction companies and mining operations, begging for a chance to bid on their parts contracts. Derek was 11 then. He'd come out sometimes, bring me sandwiches his school lunch program had made that he hadn't eaten. Sit on the workbench and watch me. "Dad, what are you making?" he'd ask. "A future," I'd tell him. "For us." He'd nod like he understood, but how could he? He was just a kid who'd lost his mother and was watching his father disappear into work, because work was the only thing that made sense anymore. Karen died in 2008 while I was in Helmand Province. Stage 4 breast cancer. She'd known for 6 months before she told me, didn't want to worry me while I was deployed. By the time I got emergency leave and made it home, she had maybe 2 weeks left. Hospice had set up a bed in our living room. Derek would come home from school and do his homework sitting next to her, holding her hand. The flight home from Helmand took 36 hours, 3 different military transports, each one feeling like it took forever. I kept thinking about the last conversation we'd had, a satellite phone call 3 weeks earlier. She'd sounded tired, but I thought it was just the stress of managing everything alone. "How's Derek doing?" I'd asked. "He's strong," she'd said, just like his father. I should have heard what she wasn't saying. I should have pushed harder, asked more questions. When I walked into that house and saw the hospital bed in our living room, saw how thin she'd become, how yellow her skin looked, I couldn't breathe. Derek was 12. He stood in the kitchen doorway watching me see his mother for the first time. His face was blank, empty, like he'd already cried all the tears he had and there was nothing left. She was so brave, so impossibly brave. "Robert," she said one night when Derek was asleep and it was just the two of us, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," I said. "Promise me you'll take care of him. Really take care of him. Don't let the war eat you alive and leave him alone. He's going to need you more than ever, and you're going to want to hide, to run away into work or drinking or anything that lets you avoid the pain. Don't do that to him. Please." I promised. I held her hand and I swore I would be there for Derek, that I would put him first, that I would be the father he needed. She smiled, that same smile I'd fallen in love with 15 years earlier. "I know you mean it," she whispered, "but meaning it and doing it are different things. Be strong, Robert. For him, for both of you." She died 3 days later, early morning, just as the sun was coming up. Derek and I were both there. I was holding one hand, he was holding the other. Her breathing had gotten shallow, raspy, and then it just stopped. The silence was worse than any sound I'd ever heard in combat. Derek didn't cry, just sat there holding her hand for another 10 minutes before he finally let go. The funeral was a blur. My brother Ray came in from Cincinnati, a few of Karen's friends from work, some neighbors. The Marine Corps sent a chaplain. Derek sat next to me in the front row of the funeral home, wearing a suit that was too big for him. We'd bought it the day before. He didn't say a word the entire service, not when people offered condolences, not when they lowered her casket into the ground, not in the car ride home. That night, I heard him crying in his room. I stood outside his door for 20 minutes, hand on the doorknob, trying to make myself go in, trying to find the words. But what do you say to a 12-year-old who just lost his mother? What comfort can you offer when you're drowning in your own grief? I never opened that door. I went to the garage instead and started sketching plans for machinery parts, because that was easier than being a father. That morning started like any Thursday. I was at the facility by 5:30, walking the floor like I always did, checking in with the night shift guys before they clocked out. Tommy Briggs was running the CNC machine in Bay 3, same as he had for 16 years. Tommy was one of my first hires back in 2010. Army veteran, served in Desert Storm, came home to find his wife had left him and his factory job had been outsourced to Mexico. He showed up at my garage with a resume and a 6-pack of beer, said he heard I was hiring vets. I wasn't hiring anyone, could barely pay myself. But something about Tommy reminded me of Patterson, that quiet competence, that pride. I hired him on the spot. "Morning, Captain," Tommy said. He still called me that even though I'd been a sergeant. Didn't matter. These guys were my platoon now. "Morning, Tommy. How's that carburetor housing batch coming?" "Smooth as butter, sir. Should have them finished by 0700. I'd moved on to Bay 7 when my phone buzzed. "Derek, can you meet me at the office at 0800? Lawyers ready to go over the transfer paperwork, finally making it official." I smiled. Today was supposed to be a celebration. At 53, after 2 decades of 16-hour days, I was going to step back, not retire completely. I'd still consult, still be around, but Derek would be CEO. He'd earned it. Georgetown Business School, 5 years learning the company from the ground up, smart as hell with an MBA, and ideas about automation and expansion I knew would take Patterson to the next level. "So I'm proud of you, son," I'd told him last week over dinner at his place in German Village. "You're going to do things with this company I never could." He'd hugged me, tight. "Thanks, Dad, for everything, for building this, for believing in me. I won't let you down." Those words, "I won't let you down." How many times had I heard them over the years? From Derek as a teenager promising to keep his grades up, From Derek in college swearing he'd pay back the money I'd lent him for textbooks. From Derek 5 years ago when I made him VP of Operations. I trusted those words because I wanted to, because he was my son, and you're supposed to trust your son. I arrived at the office at 7:45, showered and changed into the one suit I owned. Navy blue, bought for occasions like this. Derek was already there, along with our company lawyer, Stephen Ramirez, who'd handled our contracts for a decade. Margaret Wu, our head accountant for 8 years, sat quietly in the corner with her laptop. She looked pale. "Margaret, you feeling okay?" I asked. She nodded quickly, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. Something felt off, but I pushed it aside, probably just nervous about the complexity of the transfer. "Mr. Jennings," Stephen began, sliding a thick folder across the table. "These are the ownership transfer documents. Per our discussions, you're transferring 90% of Patterson Manufacturing to Derek Jennings, retaining 10% for yourself, along with a consultant fee of $12,000 monthly for the next 5 years. Sound correct?" "Sounds perfect," I said, reaching for my pen. "That 10% would keep me comfortable, let me travel a little, maybe finally take that trip to Montana I'd been talking about since 2012. Before I could sign, Margaret stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking. "Mr. Ramirez, could I speak with you privately for just one moment?" Stephen frowned. "Margaret, we're in the middle of something." "It's urgent," she insisted. Derek shot her an irritated look. "Margaret, whatever it is can wait 30 minutes. "No," she said firmly, and I was surprised by the steel in her voice. "It can't." Stephen sighed and followed her into the hallway. Through the glass wall I could see them talking, Margaret gesturing emphatically, Stephen's face going from annoyed to confused to something else. Shocked, maybe. They were out there for 6 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the wall, that old military habit of tracking time. Derek sat across from me, checking his phone, looking impatient. His leg bounced under the table. Nervous energy or something else? I couldn't tell. When Stephen and Margaret came back in, everything changed. Stephen's face was grey, ashen really, like he'd just witnessed something terrible, something that shook him to his core. Margaret walked straight to me, and that's when she leaned down and whispered, "Sir, you're not the owner anymore. I'm sorry. I just discovered it this morning." I laughed, nervously. "What are you talking about?" "Margaret, I built this company. Of course I'm the owner." The words sounded strange coming out of my mouth, hollow, like I was trying to convince myself as much as her. She opened her laptop and turned it toward me. "I've been doing the quarterly audit, standard procedure for the ownership transfer. I found transfers, stock transfers. Over the past 18 months, your shares have been systematically moved out of your name." I stared at the screen. Numbers, legal documents, transfer authorizations, all bearing my signature, dates going back to March of last year, April, June, September, December, January of this year, March, May, on and on, small percentages. 5% here, 7% there, 3.5%, 6%. Never enough to trigger alarm bells, never enough to make me question anything, but adding up to everything. My hands started shaking. I recognized that signature, the way I loop the R in Robert, the way the J in Jennings has that little flourish at the bottom. That was my handwriting, my signature, on documents I had no memory of signing. "I don't understand," I said, my voice sounding far away, like I was hearing myself from the end of a long tunnel. "I never signed these. I would remember signing these." "But you did, sir," Margaret said softly. "I have the originals in the safe. Your signature. Notarized. Every single one." I felt the room tilt. The shrapnel wound in my leg started throbbing, phantom pain that came when I was stressed. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright. "Who?" I managed to ask. "Who did I transfer them to?" She looked at Derek. "Your son, sir. As of 3 weeks ago, Derek Jennings owns 94% of Patterson Manufacturing. You own 6%. The silence in that room was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. Louder than the IED that went off outside Ramadi in 2007. Louder than the firefight in Helmand Province where Patterson died in my arms. Louder than the sound of my wife taking her last breath in that hospice bed in our living room. "Derek," I said slowly, "tell me this isn't true." He didn't look at me, just kept staring at his phone. Derek, look at me. He finally raised his eyes. His face was calm, too calm, like he'd practiced this moment in a mirror, like he'd rehearsed what he'd say when this day finally came. It's true, Dad, but you don't understand the context. Context? I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. The sound echoed in the conference room. You stole my company, and you want to talk about context? I didn't steal anything, Derek said, his voice maddeningly even. Rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this conversation in front of a mirror. I acquired it, through legal transfers that you signed, every single one of them legitimate, notarized, filed properly with the state. I never signed anything like this, I said. My hands were shaking. You signed dozens of documents over the past year and a half, Dad. You sign things all the time without reading them carefully. Budget approvals, contract amendments, HR policies, insurance updates, vendor agreements. I made sure these transfer documents were buried in those stacks. You trusted me. So you trusted the papers I put in front of you. You never even questioned it. Just signed wherever I put the sticky tabs. I remembered now. All those times Derek had come into my office with a stack of papers. Dad, just need your signature on these routine approvals. Nothing urgent. I'd been so proud that he was handling so much of the administrative work, taking pressure off me, letting me focus on the floor, on production, on the work I actually understood. And the whole time he was stealing from me, document by document, signature by signature. How long? I asked. How long have you been planning this? 4 years, Derek said. Maybe 5. Depends on when you start counting. I started thinking about it seriously after you made me VP, when I realized you were never actually going to let me run anything. You'd always be there, looking over my shoulder, questioning my decisions, undermining me with the workers who see you as some kind of saint. I gave you authority, I protested. You had full control over operations. On paper, Derek snapped. On paper, I had authority. But every time I tried to make a real change, every time I suggested automation or efficiency improvements or modernization, you'd veto it. Always some excuse about loyalty to the workers, or honoring Patterson's memory, or maintaining quality. But really, you just couldn't stand the idea of me doing things differently than you. I felt like I'd been shot again. That same burning sensation in my chest I'd felt in Ramadi when the shrapnel hit. That same sense of the world tilting sideways. My own son, the boy I'd raised, the kid I'd worked myself to death for. He'd been planning this. For 18 months, maybe longer. Why? I whispered. He stood now, too, buttoning his suit jacket. A suit that cost more than I'd spent on clothes in the past 5 years. I noticed for the first time how expensive everything about him was. The watch, the shoes, the leather briefcase. Where had all that money come from? Because you were never going to let go, Dad. You say you want to retire, but you don't. You'd still be here every day, questioning my decisions, undermining my authority with the employees who worship you. I needed clean control, and frankly, after everything I've put up with growing up, I deserve it. Everything you've put up with? Derek, I raised you, by myself, after your mother died. I was 12, Dad. 12 years old, and you were so deep in your own grief and your PTSD that half the time you forgot I existed. Do you remember missing my 8th grade graduation because you had a panic attack in the parking lot? Do you remember the night I found you passed out drunk on the garage floor on the anniversary of Mum's death? I was 14. I had to call Uncle Ray to come get you. His words were bullets, each one finding its mark, and they were true, all of them. The 8th grade graduation was June 2011. I'd been doing better by then, or so I thought. The company was starting to take off. We'd just landed our first major contract with a construction equipment manufacturer out of Pittsburgh. I'd promised Derek I'd be there, bought a new shirt, set 3 different alarms. But when I got to the school parking lot and saw all those parents and kids, something in my brain just snapped. The crowd, the noise, the way the gymnasium lights flickered reminded me of muzzle flashes. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Sat in my truck having a full-blown panic attack while my son walked across that stage alone. He never said anything about it. Just came home that night, found me sitting in the dark living room, and went to his room without a word. The night on the garage floor was worse. September 15th, 2012, Karen's birthday. She would have been 42. I'd been sober for 8 months, going to VA meetings, really trying. But that night, the loneliness was so heavy, I couldn't carry it. I bought a bottle of Jack Daniels, told myself I'd just have one drink, toast to her memory. 6 hours later, Derek found me unconscious on the concrete floor of the garage, surrounded by broken glass and tools I'd thrown in a rage I couldn't remember. He was 14 years old, had to call my brother Ray at 2 in the morning because he didn't know what else to do. Ray drove 2 hours from Cincinnati, never said a word to me, just looked at Derek with this expression of pity that I can still see clear as day. The next morning, Ray took me to the VA hospital, 30-day inpatient program. Derek stayed with Ray and his wife, Susan. When I got out, Derek was different, quieter, more distant, like he'd built a wall between us that I never quite figured out how to climb. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I reached out, every time I asked if he wanted to talk or go do something together, I got the same answer. "I'm fine, Dad. I've got homework. I've got plans. I'm fine." I wasn't perfect, I said quietly, my voice breaking. I was struggling. "I know I wasn't always there the way I should have been, but I built this company for you. For us." "You built it for yourself," Derek snapped, "to prove to your dead Marine buddies that you could make something, to prove to yourself that you weren't just another broken veteran. I was an afterthought, Dad. You were at this factory more than you were ever home. Don't you dare make it sound like you did this for me." Stephen cleared his throat. "Robert, I'm sorry, but legally these transfers appear valid. I'll need time to review everything in detail. But if you signed these documents, even without reading them carefully, they're binding, unless we can prove coercion or diminished capacity at the time of signing." Diminished capacity, I thought bitterly. Was that what they'd argue? That I was too broken, too traumatized to understand what I was signing? Maybe they were right. "I wasn't coerced," I said, my voice hollow. "I was just stupid. I trusted my son." Derek picked up his briefcase. "I'm going to give you some space, Dad. Take a few days to process this. But the reality is I now own this company. You're welcome to stay on as a consultant if you want, but I'm making the decisions now. And the first decision is that we're restructuring. 40% workforce reduction, automation of bays 3 through 9, and we're moving headquarters to Chicago within 6 months. 40%? Derek, that's almost 90 people. These are guys I served with, guys who've been here since the beginning. Tommy Briggs has been with me for 16 years. Rachel Freeman is a single mom who was living in her car when I hired her. David Park lost his arm in Kandahar, and nobody would give him a chance. You're going to throw them all away. They're inefficient, Dad. The whole operation is. You run this place like it's still 2010. We're bleeding money on legacy employees and outdated equipment. I'm going to turn this into a modern, profitable company, even if it means gutting everything you built. You can't do this, I said, but even as I said it, I knew he could. Actually, I can. I own it. He walked to the door, then turned back. And Dad, that 10% you thought you were keeping? It's actually 6%, and your consultant fee, I'm terminating that arrangement. You'll get what you legally own. 6% of profits, which after my restructuring will be minimal for at least 2 years. Consider it an early lesson in reading documents before you sign them. Then he was gone. I stood there for what felt like an hour, but was probably 3 minutes. Margaret was crying quietly. Stephen was furiously typing on his laptop, already searching for legal angles, and I was trying to remember how to breathe, trying to remember why I shouldn't just walk out of this building and keep walking until I couldn't walk anymore. "Mr. Jennings," Stephen said finally, "I need to be honest with you. Unless we find evidence of fraud, or that you were mentally incompetent when you signed these, which given your military service and documented PTSD might be an angle we could pursue, this is going to be very difficult to fight. My son just stole 20 years of my life," I said. "There has to be something we can do. We'll explore every option," Stephen promised, "but it's going to take time and money. Legal fees for something like this could run into 6 figures. Easily." "I don't have 6 figures," I said. "I put everything into this company. My savings, my VA benefits, everything. All I have is this, and now I don't even have this." I walked out of that conference room in a daze, walked through the factory I'd built from nothing, past the machines I'd saved for years to buy, past the men and women I'd hired, many of them veterans like me, people who needed a second chance, and I gave it to them. Tommy Briggs saw my face and walked over. "Captain, you okay?" You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't tell him, not yet. That I'd just lost everything, that his job was probably gone in 6 months, that Derek was going to tear apart everything we'd built and turn it into just another soulless corporation, focused only on profit margins and shareholder value. I'm fine, Tommy, I lied. Just a long meeting. I left the building and sat in my truck in the parking lot. A 2016 Ford F-150 with 173,000 miles on it. Paid off, thank God, because I had a feeling that truck was about to become my most valuable possession. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Jennings? A woman's voice. Professional. Warm. Yes? This is Patricia Delaney. I'm an attorney specializing in corporate disputes. Your accountant, Margaret Wu, just called me. She thought you might need representation. I appreciate that, Ms. Delaney, but I can't afford a corporate attorney right now. Ms. Delaney laughed softly. Mr. Jennings, I'm a Marine veteran too, served in Iraq in 2005, and I don't charge veterans for the first consultation. Can you meet me for coffee? Something in her voice. Maybe it was the way she said Marine. Maybe it was just that I had nowhere else to go and nothing else to lose. Yeah, I said. I can meet you. An hour later, I was sitting across from Patricia Delaney in a coffee shop near Ohio State's campus. She was maybe 45, with short grey hair and sharp eyes that reminded me of my old commanding officer, the kind of eyes that had seen things, done things, survived things. She'd reviewed the documents Margaret had emailed her. She had the hands of someone who'd worked with them, scars on her knuckles, a burn mark on her left forearm that looked like it came from touching something hot in a hurry. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm, military firm. Before she sat down, I noticed she scanned the coffee shop, exits, windows, potential threats, old habits from Iraq that never quite go away. I served with 1st Marine Division in Fallujah, she said, noticing me noticing. 2004. I was a convoy commander. Lost my vehicle to an IED en route Michigan. 3 of my Marines died. I got out with a traumatic brain injury and shrapnel in my back. Spent 2 years at Walter Reed, learning to walk again without falling over. I nodded. We'd both paid the price. Both carried our wars home with us. This is elegant, she said, spreading the documents across the table between our coffee cups. And I hated the admiration in her voice. Whoever planned this knew exactly what they were doing. Your son spread these transfers over 18 months, never taking more than 8% at a time, which kept them under the threshold that would require board approval or special notification according to your corporate bylaws. He used your trust and your habit of signing operational documents to mask what he was doing. See here. She pointed to one document dated April of last year. This transfer is buried on page 7 of a 15-page equipment lease agreement. The lease itself is real and necessary, but paragraph 12.3 transfers 5% of your shares to Derek Jennings. The language is dense, technical, easy to miss if you're just skimming for the key terms of the lease. And look at the placement. Right in the middle of the document where people's attention starts to wander, she pulled out another document, this one from September. Same thing, page 9 of a supplier contract. 4% transfer hidden in the indemnification clause. Your son didn't just steal from you, Mr. Jennings. He studied you, learned your patterns, figured out that you sign operational documents quickly because you trust your people to handle the details. He weaponized that trust. It's actually impressive from a technical standpoint, though it makes me sick to say it. Can we prove fraud? Patricia shook her head. Fraud requires proving he knowingly deceived you for personal gain. But he'll argue these were legitimate business transfers that you approved. Your signature is on every document. The notary witnessed you signing. Unless that notary was in on it, which is possible but hard to prove, you signed these willingly. Even if you didn't understand what you were signing. I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I'd been awake since 4 in the morning, hadn't eaten since yesterday. My leg was throbbing, my head was pounding. And I was looking at this woman I'd just met and realizing she was probably my only hope. So I just let him have it. Let him destroy everything I built. Patricia leaned forward. Her eyes locked on mine. I didn't say that. I said proving fraud is hard, but there might be another angle. Your son made a mistake. What mistake? He moved too fast. He now owns 94%, but he needs your remaining 6% to fully consolidate control for the restructuring he wants to do. Some of the contracts you have with suppliers and clients have provisions requiring owner approval for major operational changes. He can't make his Chicago move or his workforce reduction without triggering penalty clauses unless he has full ownership control. Which means he needs to buy you out, I said, understanding. And he probably thought you'd just roll over and sell to him cheap because you're demoralized and don't have resources to fight. Patricia smiled. It was the smile of a predator. A wolf who just spotted wounded prey. But here's what we're going to do instead. We're going to make him pay for every percentage point. And we're going to use that money to investigate how he pulled this off. Because I guarantee you, there's dirt here. People who plan thefts this elaborate usually get greedy in other ways too. Over the next week, Patricia worked fast. She filed an injunction blocking any major corporate changes until ownership disputes were resolved. She deposed Margaret, Stephen, and half a dozen other people who'd witnessed me signing documents over the past 2 years. She dug into Derek's finances and found something interesting. The injunction hearing was in front of Judge Morrison at Franklin County Common Pleas. Derek's lawyers argued that I was just a disgruntled former owner trying to block legitimate business operations. Patricia presented the evidence of systematic stock transfers without proper disclosure. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, 30 days. It wasn't much, but it was something. Margaret's deposition took 4 hours. She went through every document, every transfer, every moment she'd witnessed. She'd started noticing something was off about 6 months ago. The numbers weren't adding up. Revenue was strong, but profits were thin. She'd started digging, found payments to Summit Consulting Services, $460,000 over 4 years for operational efficiency reviews that nobody could quite explain. When she tried to ask Derek about it, he'd been evasive, said they were confidential assessments, competitive intelligence, proprietary methods, all the buzzwords that sound important but mean nothing. She'd let it go because Derek was the VP and she was just the accountant, but it nagged at her, so she kept digging. She found the stock transfers 3 days before our scheduled signing ceremony. At first, she thought it was a clerical error, some paperwork that had been filed incorrectly. But then she pulled the originals from the safe, saw my signature, saw the notary stamps, realized what had happened. She'd called Patricia because she didn't know what else to do, felt responsible because she'd been the one maintaining the books, and somehow missed this for 18 months. You didn't miss it, Patricia told her. You were supposed to see routine operational paperwork. The transfers were deliberately hidden. This isn't on you. But Margaret still cried during her deposition, said she felt like she'd failed me, failed the company, failed everyone. Patricia also deposed Stephen Ramirez, our company lawyer. He was defensive at first, angry that his professional reputation was being questioned. But as Patricia walked him through the documents, I watched his face change. He hadn't known. Derek had never sent these to him for review, had used a different notary, had kept everything compartmentalized. Stephen had assumed the signing ceremony would be the first transfer, the big moment when ownership changed hands. He'd prepared those documents in good faith, had no idea that Derek already owned 94%. When he realized he'd been used, manipulated, turned into an unwitting accomplice, he offered to testify for us, said he'd waive his fees, do whatever it took to make this right. My son, who'd been making $85,000 a year as VP of operations, had somehow purchased a $600,000 home in German Village 3 years ago. Where'd the down payment come from? Patricia asked me. We were in her office 3 days after the injunction was granted, surrounded by papers and coffee cups and Chinese food containers from working through dinner. Her walls were covered with commendations and photos from her service. I could see a younger version of her in desert camouflage standing next to a Humvee, 3 other Marines in the photo. She saw me looking. All dead, she said quietly. IED en route Michigan. March 2004. I was the only one who made it out. Driver, gunner, and my radio operator. Good Marines, better people. Sometimes I wonder why I survived and they didn't. I understood that feeling. Survivor's guilt. The question that haunted you at 3 in the morning. Why me? Why did I make it when Patterson didn't? When Martinez didn't? When so many good men stayed in the desert? I don't know, I admitted. He said he'd saved it. Made it sound like he'd been living frugally, putting away money since college. On $85,000 in Columbus, Ohio, while making student loan payments? Patricia pulled up bank records she'd subpoenaed. Your company paid a vendor called Summit Consulting Services $460,000 over the past 4 years for operational efficiency reviews. She had screenshots, bank transfers, invoices, Summit Consulting Services, registered address in Delaware, services described in vague terms, operational efficiency, process optimization, strategic consulting, $460,000 in total. Payments ranging from $15,000 to $35,000, spread out over 4 years. Small enough not to trigger major scrutiny, large enough to add up. I frowned. I remember approving those. Derek said they were industry standard. They helped us streamline production, identify cost savings. He showed me reports, PowerPoint presentations with charts and graphs about efficiency gains. He was right about that, Patricia said. Lots of companies use consultants. The reports were probably real. Your company probably did benefit from some legitimate consulting, but that's the beauty of the scam. Mix real work with theft. Make it hard to separate legitimate business expenses from fraud. Except Summit Consulting Services is owned by a shell corporation registered in Delaware called SC Holdings LLC, which is owned by another shell corporation registered in Nevada called Morrison Enterprises Group, which is ultimately owned by your son's wife, Brittany Morrison. She pulled up more documents, corporation filings, business licenses, tax returns, a paper trail that took her 3 days to untangle. Derek and Brittany had been careful. Layers of companies, different states. Just enough separation to make it hard to trace, but not impossible. Never impossible if you know where to look. Derek's married? Since when? The words came out like I'd been punched. Since 2 years ago, Patricia said, her voice gentle. Small ceremony in Cincinnati. Courthouse wedding. 20 people. Her family mostly. A few friends. You weren't invited. She showed me a photo she'd found on social media. Derek in a suit. A blonde woman in a simple white dress. Both smiling. The date stamp said June 18th, 2 years ago. I'd talked to Derek on the phone that week. He'd never mentioned anything. Never said I'm getting married. Never said I met someone. Just kept it secret. I looked through records, Patricia continued. He never changed his emergency contact information with the company. Never mentioned a wife in any documentation. Filed his taxes as married, but didn't update his employee records. Kept her completely separate from his work life. Which makes sense if you're planning to commit fraud. Fewer connections, fewer questions. The pain of that hit harder than I expected. Harder than the betrayal about the company. My son got married and didn't tell me. Didn't invite me. Just cut me out of his life completely while pretending everything was fine. He didn't even tell me, I said, and I hated how broken my voice sounded. Patricia's voice was gentle. Robert, your son has been planning this for at least 4 years. Probably longer. The fake consulting company, the secret marriage, the slow transfer of stock. This wasn't opportunistic. This wasn't him seeing an opportunity and taking it. This was calculated, methodical. He built this plan step by step and executed it perfectly. Why? I asked, and I hated how I sounded like a child asking why the world was cruel. Why would he do this? I'm his father. I raised him. I gave him everything. Patricia closed her laptop. I've handled a lot of cases like this. Not exactly like this, but similar. Kids who steal from parents. Business partners who betray each other. And you know what I've learned? It's almost never really about the money. It's about power, control, resentment that's been building for years, sometimes decades. Your son told you that you weren't there for him after his mother died. Was he right? I thought about those years. 2007 through 2012. The worst years of my life. Coming home from Afghanistan broken. Starting the company because I didn't know what else to do with myself. Working 100-hour weeks because if I stopped working, I started remembering. Patterson's face. The kid we couldn't save in Helmand. The smell of burning. The screaming. Derek had been there somewhere on the periphery of my vision. But had I really seen him? He was right, I said quietly. I wasn't there. I was physically present sometimes, but I was gone. In my head. In the war. In the grief over Karen. He was a kid who'd lost his mother and his father simultaneously, even though I was still breathing. I poured everything into that company because it was the only thing that made sense, the only thing I could control. And I told myself I was doing it for Derek, for our future. But really I was doing it to survive, and he was just collateral damage. That doesn't justify what he did to you, Patricia said firmly. Lots of people have difficult childhoods. They don't commit corporate fraud. They don't systematically steal from their parents. They don't create shell companies and forge documents and plan elaborate thefts. Your son made choices, bad choices, illegal choices, and he has to face consequences. But it might explain the why, and understanding the why might give us leverage. The injunction held. Derek couldn't make his changes, and he was furious. He called me for the first time in 3 weeks. I was sitting in my house, Karen's house, surrounded by memories and ghosts. Dad, you need to drop this lawsuit. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm protecting what's mine, I said. You stole my company. I acquired it legally, Derek said, and his voice was cold, colder than I'd ever heard it. Dad, listen to yourself. You're going to waste whatever money you have left fighting a battle you can't win. Just sell me your 6%. I'll give you $200,000 for it. That's generous. $200,000? Derek, 6% of this company is worth at least $2.5 million based on last year's revenue. Fine, he snapped. $1 million, final offer. Take it or watch me burn this company to the ground out of spite. There it was. The truth. My son would rather destroy Patterson Manufacturing than let me have any part of it. Would rather throw 90 people out of work than admit he was wrong. Would rather salt the earth than share. No deal, I said, and hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. I drove to the factory at 2 in the morning and sat in the parking lot, staring at the building I'd built from nothing, watched the night shift through the windows, saw the lights in Bay 3 where Tommy was probably running his machine, thought about all the people inside who trusted me, who believed in what we'd built, who were counting on me to protect them, and I realized I was failing them, just like I'd failed Derek. My phone rang. Margaret Wu. Mr. Jennings, I'm so sorry to call this late, but I found something. I've been going through old files, backup drives, everything I could access before Derek locks me out completely, and I found a backup drive from 4 years ago. It has emails. Emails between Derek and someone named Brittany Morrison about the plan. What plan? The plan to take the company. Mr. Jennings, they wrote it all out. How they'd create Summit Consulting to bleed money. How Derek would get you to sign transfers by burying them in routine paperwork. How they'd wait until you were ready to retire so you wouldn't fight back because you'd be tired and ready to let go. How they'd anticipated every possible response you might have and planned countermeasures. It's all there, every detail, every step. Can you send it to Patricia? Already did, Margaret said. Mr. Jennings, there's something else. Derek found out I called Patricia. He fired me this afternoon. I'm so sorry, Margaret. You were just trying to help. You shouldn't lose your job because of me. I'll be okay, she said. I'm 62. I was going to retire in a few years anyway. But Mr. Jennings, be careful. Derek's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. She was right. 2 days later, I was leaving Patricia's office at 8 in the evening when a car came out of nowhere. Black sedan, no plates visible in the dark. It swerved directly at me as I crossed the street. I dove backward. Years of combat training kicking in, rolled on my bad leg and felt something tear. The car missed me by inches and sped away. Patricia ran out. Robert, oh my God. Are you okay? Did you see the driver? I couldn't see clearly, I said, pain shooting through my leg. But I know who sent them. We need to call the police. We did. They took a report. But without plates or a clear view of the driver, there wasn't much they could do. Maybe it was just a drunk driver, the cop said. Maybe, I replied, but I didn't believe it. Patricia drove me to the ER. The ride took 15 minutes but felt like hours. Every bump in the road sent lightning bolts of pain through my knee. I kept replaying the car swerving at me, the way it accelerated toward me instead of away, the deliberate nature of it. This wasn't some drunk driver. This was intentional. Torn meniscus, the doctor said after the X-rays and MRI. You're going to need surgery. And at your age, with your previous injuries, recovery is going to be rough. 6 to 8 weeks minimum before you're walking without crutches. 12 weeks before you're anything close to normal. The doctor was young, maybe 30. Probably hadn't even been born when I was in Fallujah. He looked at my chart. Says here you have previous trauma to this leg. Shrapnel wound from Iraq? Yeah, I said. 2006. The doctor nodded. That's going to complicate things. Scar tissue. Reduced blood flow. Your healing is going to be slower than a normal patient. We'll do the surgery, but you need to understand this is going to be a long road. Do you have someone who can help you at home? Family? Friends? I thought about Derek. About how he'd probably smile if he heard about this. About how this injury was probably exactly what he'd been hoping for. Make me weak, dependent, desperate. No, I said, I'll manage. The doctor frowned. Mr. Jennings, you're not going to be able to drive for at least 6 weeks. You're going to need help with basic tasks. Groceries, cooking, even showering is going to be difficult. I strongly recommend you arrange for someone to stay with you. I'll figure it out, I said. I always do. The surgery was scheduled for 2 days later. Patricia drove me home from the ER that first night. My house felt emptier than ever. Colder. Karen's house, the place where she'd died, where Derek had grown up, where I'd built so many memories that had turned to ghosts. Patricia helped me inside, got me settled on the couch with ice on my knee and pain medication within reach. Call me if you need anything, she said. I mean it, Robert. Anything. I will, I lied. We both knew I wouldn't. I'd learned in the Marines that the only person you can really count on is yourself. Depending on others just sets you up for disappointment. That night, drugged on pain medication, lying on my couch because I couldn't make it upstairs to my bedroom, I realized how completely Derek had won. He had my company. He had resources. He had youth and health. And I had 6% of nothing. A blown knee that might never properly heal, and a lawyer I couldn't afford to keep paying. The legal fees were already approaching $20,000. Patricia had been generous, discounting her rates because I was a veteran, but she still had to eat, still had to pay her staff. I picked up my phone and started to call her, started to tell her to drop the case, that I couldn't fight anymore, that Derek could have it all. But before I could dial, my phone rang. Margaret Wu. Mr. Jennings, I'm so sorry to call this late, but I found something. I've been going through old files, backup drives, everything I could access before Derek locks me out completely. I couldn't sleep, kept thinking there had to be evidence, proof, something that would show what he'd done. And I found a backup drive from 4 years ago. It was in a box of old equipment in the storage room. It has emails between Derek and someone named Brittany Morrison about the plan. What plan? My heart was racing despite the pain medication clouding my thoughts. The plan to take the company, she said. Her voice was shaking. Mr. Jennings, they wrote it all out. How they'd create Summit Consulting to bleed money from Patterson. How Derek would get you to sign transfers by burying them in routine paperwork. How they'd wait until you were ready to retire so you wouldn't fight back, because you'd be tired and ready to let go. How they'd anticipated every possible response you might have and planned countermeasures. It's all there. Every detail. Every step. They treated it like a military operation. Targets, timelines, contingencies. Can you send it to Patricia? Already did, Margaret said. Sent her everything 10 minutes ago. Mr. Jennings, there's something else. Derek found out I called Patricia. He fired me this afternoon, showed up at my house with a security guard, and demanded my keys and my laptop. Said I was terminated for cause. Violation of confidentiality. I'm so sorry, Margaret. You were just trying to help. You shouldn't lose your job because of me. I'll be okay, she said, but I could hear the fear in her voice. I'm 62. I was going to retire in a few years anyway. I've got some savings. But Mr. Jennings, be careful. Derek's desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. I think he might be the one who tried to hit you with that car tonight. I know, I said quietly. I know he was. Criminal? That means Derek could go to jail. If he's convicted, yes. 5 to 10 years potentially. Patricia sat down. Her expression was serious. Robert, I know he's your son, but he tried to destroy you. He literally might have tried to kill you last night. You have to decide who you want to be. The father who protects his son no matter what, Or the man who stands up for himself and for the 200 people whose jobs your son is about to eliminate? I closed my eyes, thought about Tommy Briggs, who'd been with me since the beginning, about Rachel Freeman, single mom working in shipping who I'd hired when no one else would, about David Park, Afghan war veteran with a prosthetic arm who ran quality control. Derek was going to fire them all, to maximize profits, to prove he was smarter than his broken father. File the charges, I said. The next 6 weeks were brutal, surgery on my knee, physical therapy that made me want to scream. Living in my house alone, the same house where Karen died, where I'd raised Derek surrounded by ghosts. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning and walk through the rooms. Derek's childhood bedroom, unchanged since he left for college. Karen's pictures on the walls. The garage where I'd built the first prototype parts that became Patterson Manufacturing. Patricia kept me updated. Derek had been arrested, released on $200,000 bail. The criminal case was moving forward, but slowly. The civil case was more interesting. Once the fraud evidence came out, Derek's position collapsed. His lawyers advised him to settle. We met in a mediation room in downtown Columbus. Derek looked thinner, older. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. The mediator outlined the settlement. Derek would return 80% of the company to me. He'd keep 14%, which was more than he deserved, but less than he'd stolen. I'd buy out his remaining shares over 5 years at fair market value. He'd resign as an officer and have no operational role. All the money stolen through Summit Consulting would be repaid, and Derek would plead guilty to reduced charges. Probation instead of prison if he cooperated fully. Derek stared at the table. "Dad," he said quietly, "I'm sorry." I looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in months, and I didn't see a thief. I saw the 12-year-old boy who'd found me drunk on the garage floor, the teenager who'd learned to be invisible because his father was fighting wars that had ended years ago, the young man who'd worked his ass off to get into Georgetown, maybe partly to get away from me. "You should have just told me," I said. "Told me you were angry. Told me I'd failed you as a father. We could have worked it out, Derek. We could have gone to therapy. Done something other than this." He was crying now. Real tears. Not the manipulative kind. "I tried, Dad. I tried talking to you 100 times, but you were always at the factory. Or you were in your head, somewhere I couldn't reach. And after a while, I just got so angry. I wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me. By taking the only thing you actually loved," I said. "This company." Derek nodded. "It was never me, was it? You loved Patterson Manufacturing more than you ever loved me." "That's not true," I started to say, but stopped. Was it true? Had I loved the company more? Had I poured all my grief and pain and need for purpose into steel and concrete and contracts because it was easier than pouring it into a traumatized kid who needed a father? "Maybe we both failed each other," I said finally. "But what you did was wrong, Derek, and you have to own that." "I do," he whispered. "I own it." "Do we have a deal?" the mediator asked. I thought about it, about taking back my company, about Derek's legal troubles being reduced to probation, about whether I wanted revenge or resolution. "We have a deal," I said. "On one condition." "What condition?" Derek asked. "You go to therapy. Real therapy, not some court-mandated bullshit. You deal with your anger and your resentment and whatever else is going on in your head. And if after a year you've done the work and you want to try to have a relationship with me, a real one, I'm open to it. No promises, but I'm open." Derek stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, Dad, okay." 6 months later, I was back in my office at Patterson Manufacturing. The factory floor was humming. No layoffs, no Chicago move. I'd promoted Margaret to CFO with a 20% raise and given her a small equity stake in the company. 5%. She'd earned it. She'd risked everything to help me. Tommy Briggs was training new hires, teaching them the same precision and care that James Patterson had taught me 20 years ago in Fallujah. We'd landed 3 major contracts I'd been working on before everything fell apart. The company was doing $48 million in revenue. Growing. Thriving. Those 6 months had been the hardest of my life, and I'd survived Ramadi and Helmand. The surgery went well, but recovery was brutal. Physical therapy 3 times a week. Exercises that made me want to scream. Learning to walk again. Again. Same thing I'd done after the IED in 2006. At 53, my body didn't heal the way it had at 29. There were days I couldn't get out of bed, days the pain was so bad, I'd lie there thinking about that bottle of Percocet the doctor had prescribed, and how easy it would be to just take the whole thing. End the pain. End the struggle. But then I'd think about Tommy and Margaret and all the others counting on me. Think about Derek rotting in jail because I'd given up. Think about Karen asking me to take care of our son and me failing one more time. So I'd get up, do the exercises, go to PT, come home exhausted, do it again the next day. Patricia visited twice a week, updating me on the case. Derek's bail had been set at $200,000. He'd made it somehow. I didn't ask where the money came from. Brittany's family, maybe, or friends, or money he'd hidden that we hadn't found yet. He was out but not allowed to come within 500 feet of me or Patterson Manufacturing. The criminal case was moving slowly. That's how the system works. Investigations, discovery, motions. Derek's lawyers were good, expensive. They filed everything they could to delay, argued that the stock transfers were legitimate business transactions, that I'd signed everything willingly. That Derek had no obligation to explain every detail of what I was signing. It was my responsibility as a business owner to read what I signed. But Patricia was better. She had the emails. She had Brittany's shell companies. She had 4 years of systematic theft, documented in Derek's own words. The prosecutor, a woman named Janet Hernandez, who'd made her career on white-collar crime, was confident. "This is as clean a case as I've ever seen," she told me. "Your son documented his own crime. We're going to win." The civil case was more interesting. Once the criminal fraud evidence came out, Derek's position collapsed like a house of cards. His lawyers advised him to settle, said if he went to trial, he'd not only lose but face additional liability, punitive damages, attorney's fees. He could end up owing millions he didn't have. Better to negotiate now, while he still had some leverage. My knee was better, not perfect. I'd never run again. Never play basketball with grandkids, I'd probably never have. But I could walk the floor every morning without pain, with just a slight limp that most people probably didn't notice. That was enough. Derek had kept his word about therapy. Twice a week, Patricia had confirmed through his lawyer. He'd divorced Brittany, smart move. She'd turned state's evidence against him, gave prosecutors everything in exchange for immunity. Last I heard, she'd moved to Tampa, changed her name. Started over somewhere Derek would never find her. We talked on the phone once a month, awkward conversations that never lasted more than 10 minutes. How's therapy? How's work? How's your knee? Like strangers making small talk at a bus stop. But they were honest conversations. No more lies, no more manipulation, just two broken people trying to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. That was progress. Slow, painful, but progress. I was locking up late one Thursday when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Jennings?" A young man's voice, nervous, shaking. "Yes? My name is Kevin Thompson. I'm a veteran. Marines, discharged 6 months ago. I've been trying to find work, and someone told me you hire veterans. They said you give people chances." "I do," I said. "Can you be here tomorrow morning at 0700? We'll find something for you." "Really?" Kevin's voice broke. "Just like that?" "Just like that," I said. "Welcome home, Marine." "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "Thank you so much." After I hung up, I sat in my truck for a while, thought about the past year, about almost losing everything, about discovering my son's betrayal, about fighting back, about choosing resolution over revenge. Was I happy? I didn't know if happy was the right word, but I was at peace. For the first time since I came home from Afghanistan in 2009, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not running from ghosts, not drowning in work to avoid memories, just present. Here. Now. I started the truck and drove home. The house was still full of ghosts. Karen's pictures on the walls. Derek's childhood bedroom untouched. But maybe that was okay. Maybe you don't erase the past. You just learn to live with it, to honor it without being controlled by it. I made myself dinner, watched the news, went to bed at 2200, same as I had for 30 years. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept through the night without nightmares. No Ramadi, no Helmand, no Patterson dying in my arms. Just quiet. Peace. The next morning, I was at the factory by 0530. Kevin Thompson showed up at 0645, 20 minutes early. Good sign. He was skinny, haunted eyes, nervous hands. I recognized all of it, recognized myself 15 years ago. "Welcome to Patterson Manufacturing," I said, shaking his hand. "Let me show you around." As we walked the floor, I told him about the company, about the men and women who worked here, about our mission, not just to make parts, but to make a place where people mattered, where second chances were the standard, not the exception. Kevin listened with the intensity of someone starving for purpose. "Mr. Jennings," he said finally, "why are you doing this? Why take a chance on someone like me?" "Because someone took a chance on me once," I said. "And because I almost lost everything by forgetting what really matters. This company isn't about money or contracts or revenue. It's about people. It's about proving that broken doesn't mean useless, that coming home from war isn't the end of your story. It's just a chapter, do you understand?" He nodded. His eyes were wet. "I understand, sir." "Good," I said. "Then let's get to work. We have parts to make and lives to build. And Kevin, I know you're struggling right now. I know you're scared and uncertain and wondering if you'll ever feel normal again. The answer is no, you won't feel normal. Not the way you used to. But you'll find a new normal. A purpose. A place. I promise you that." "Thank you, sir," he whispered. "Thank you for seeing me." "I see you, Marine," I said. "And you're going to be just fine, we both are." That afternoon, Derek called. Our monthly conversation. "Dad," he said, "I got a job, nothing fancy. Junior analyst at a consulting firm. But it's honest work." "I'm proud of you, son," I said, and meant it. "How's therapy?" "Hard," Derek admitted. "Really hard. My therapist says I have a lot of unresolved trauma from Mom's death and from feeling abandoned by you, but I'm working through it." "I'm glad," I said. "And Derek, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. I know I wasn't the father you needed. I'm trying to be better, even if it's too late." "It's not too late," Derek said quietly. "Maybe we can't get back what we lost. But maybe we can build something new. I'd like that." "Me too," I said. "Me too, son." After we hung up, I sat in my office and thought about everything that had happened, about betrayal and redemption, about anger and forgiveness, about the company I'd almost lost, and the son I'd failed, and the chance we were both getting to try again. Was it a happy ending? No. Happy endings are for fairy tales. This was real life. Messy, complicated, painful. But it was honest. And honestly, that was enough. I looked out my window at the factory floor, at Tommy and Rachel and David and Kevin and all the others. My real family. The one I'd chosen and the one that had chosen me. And I realized that Margaret Wu had been right that terrible morning 6 months ago. I wasn't the owner, not really. You don't own a place like this. You're its steward, its guardian, and if you're lucky, its purpose becomes your purpose. Patterson Manufacturing wasn't just a company. It was a promise. A promise to every veteran who came through our doors that they mattered, that their service meant something, that coming home broken wasn't the end. I'd almost broken that promise, almost let anger and betrayal and my own failures destroy it. But I hadn't. We'd survived, and we'd keep surviving. One day at a time, one hire at a time, one second chance at a time. Because that's what we do. We build, we repair, we keep going. Semper Fi, always faithful. Not just to the core, but to each other. To the mission. To the belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove they're more than their worst moment. That's the real story. Not about a company being stolen, but about a company being saved by the very people it was built to serve. And if that's not worth fighting for, I don't know what is. 20 years from now, when I'm gone, Patterson Manufacturing will still be here, still hiring veterans, still giving chances, still proving that broken things can be made whole. That's my legacy. Not the money or the revenue or the contracts, but the lives, the second chances, the proof that one person can make a difference if they're willing to try. Derek understood that now, I think. He was trying to make a difference in his own way, rebuilding his life, earning back trust, learning that real power isn't about control, it's about service. Maybe someday he'd come back, not to run the company, but to be part of it, to understand what I'd been trying to build all along. And if he didn't, that was okay too, because Patterson Manufacturing was bigger than me, bigger than Derek, bigger than any one person. It was an idea, a promise, a mission, and missions don't end just because soldiers fall. Someone else picks up the flag, keeps moving forward, completes the objective. That's what Tommy and Margaret and Rachel and all the others would do when I was gone. They'd keep the promise, keep the mission alive. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. I stood up from my desk, grabbed my jacket and headed out to the floor. Kevin was struggling with a machine calibration. I walked over. "Here, let me show you," I said. "Like this. See?" His face lit up with understanding. "Got it, sir. Thank you." That's what it's all about, I thought. Passing it on. Teaching. Building. Creating something that outlasts you, not for glory or recognition, but because it's right. Because it matters. Because every person deserves a chance to matter. And sometimes in this broken world, you have to be the one who gives them that chance, even when it costs you everything. Especially then. That's when it means the most. I walked back to my office as the evening shift came on. The factory lights blazed against the darkening Ohio sky. Inside, 233 people were working, building, creating, living lives that mattered, and I was part of that. Not the hero, not the savior. Just a broken veteran who'd found purpose in helping other broken people find theirs. That was enough. That was everything. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, not even for the son I'd lost and might never fully regain. Because this, right here, right now, this was what I was meant to do, this was my mission, and I was going to complete it, no matter what. Semper Fidelis, always faithful, to the end.